Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining this week's ASRG presentation. We're going to go ahead and get started here in just a second. We have an exciting presentation from Upstream. I will leave that and that introduction to Yonatan, who we'll be hearing from in just a few minutes. So just a few items about the ASRG. Who you're hearing from today. I am Brandon Berry. I am the ASRG Americas coordinator. So I help lead the success of ASRG chapters in North, Central, and South America, where we have lots of new and exciting chapters coming up. My day job, I'm the CEO at Block Harbor Cybersecurity. We're an automotive security service provider. Working with some of the automakers here in the US, providing services to help out them in cybersecurity. Yeah, and a little bit about ASRG. If this is your first time joining, what the ASRG is all about is kind of these three core pillars. Knowledge, making sure that we're making available resources so that you can enter the space, you can get the latest information about automotive security, such as these presentations, making sure that researchers and companies can share the latest in their research with you guys. Networking, it's tough right now, but you know, a big part of the ASRG is allowing members to meet each other. So the hackers in the ASRG to talk with the engineers at automotive companies, to talk with vendors, etc., making sure that we're guiding a conversation, getting all kinds of voices together. And then finally, collaboration, making sure that all those parties are working together to guide the industry. We're just over 5,600 members with 34 locations in 18 countries. So it's grown pretty big. If you're interested in starting a chapter around you think that there's an automotive security community that you want to cultivate, reach out to us at hello@asrg.io. We'd love to help you kick that off and give that a shot. See if we can kind of help you do that, as well as let you and your chapter tap into our global community of members. Some of the upcoming talks. We have so many people who have been reaching out to present exciting research and topics to the ASRG and to you guys. In the upcoming weeks, we'll be hearing from Itemis, Airlu, Gardnock, Cybellum, GMB, and C2A. We'll take a brief break during the holiday time, but we'll be back ready to go in January of 2021. And we have talks booked out through well into 2021. If you are interested in giving a talk here at the ASRG, we would love to hear from you. We'd love to try and get you in and on the schedule. If that's the case, reach out to us at cfp@asrg.io, and we'll start a conversation, and we'll get you on the calendar. So I kept this short. Without further ado, I would like to turn this over to Yonatan, where he's the CTO at Upstream. I'll let him introduce himself. He's going to walk us through some real-life cyber attack examples as they relate to the WP29 regulations that are front and center for many of us in the industry. And without further ado, Yonatan, you have the stage.
Thanks a lot, Brandon. So hi, everyone. My name is Yonatan Appel, CTO of Upstream Security. In Upstream, I handle cybersecurity research for automotive and also the technical side of the regulations. And I'm going to talk today about WP29 regulation as seen through real-life cyber attacks. It's important to note that all the information here is based on public information from the web, so there's nothing confidential or unpublished in the content that I'm going to go through. So let's start by talking about the challenges in securing connected vehicles. So we see four major challenges that are driving this industry. First one is the vehicle complexity. So we see the vehicles becoming more and more complex, more and more software-based, with more and more interfaces to the vehicle, some close proximity, some remote proximity, and each of these interfaces can do more because we want to do more functionally on the vehicle, which ultimately increases the attack surface of the vehicle. Second challenge is backend systems. So we have hundreds of millions of vehicles connecting already today and in the next couple of years to the backend systems. And essentially, not only the vehicles are being physically connected to the backend systems, but more and more services are being added, which means that these backend services can do more and more. So this actually increases the attack surface twofold. Firstly, a hacker from inside the backend organization can get to the vehicles. But secondly, and more importantly, once that is done, he can actually reach millions of vehicles, which ultimately increases the risk related to the IT to OT connections. The third one is supply chain. So the vehicles have a complex supply chain, both horizontally and vertically, and threats exist at multiple points in the supply chain. And with the vehicle being on the road for many, many years, far more than your phone or your laptop, the challenge of maintaining the supply chain secure over time is difficult. And the last and very important is the changing threat landscape. So with the vehicle again being on the road for between 10 and 15 years, we'll see new attack vectors emerge and also attacks related to the actual changes in the vehicle services and the vehicle structured and functionality related to FOTA over time. So again, when we build the vehicle, it might be secure when we build it, but it also needs to be secure in the future and in the far future, and that's very challenging. And just to demonstrate the challenge here, so this is some summarized information based on threat work and research that we did in Upstream. And here you can see actual cyber attacks over the last decade divided into various vehicle interfaces and attack vectors. And you can see here that all of the vehicle interfaces get attacked over time. And the numbers that you see in the middle are related to threat vectors. And you can see that there are many threats from the servers and OBD dongles, mobile apps. So you see the remote threat vectors increasing, which is increasingly important. Also, by the way, the number here, 480, it's actually, this slide is from some time ago. Right now, the number is much higher. So this threat was seen not only by the OEMs, but it was also observed by the industry. And in the last 5 years, we're seeing lots of regulation work happening. We're seeing regulation both on the national level by, for example, Her Majesty's government, and NISTA, and other national bodies. We're seeing standardization and guideline work by professional industry bodies like AutoISAC, AutoSAR, and we're also seeing regulations by international bodies like, for example, SAE and ISO and UNECE. And these are, I think, the most notable ones, and specifically it's SAE ISO 21434 and UNECE WP29 CSMS and SUMS. And today we're going to focus mainly on WP29. The reason why we're focusing on these is because these standard and regulation are actually driven by international standardization and regulation bodies, and at least from what we're seeing, they're significantly affecting the market, the OEMs, government, consumers, and we think these are pretty important. So let's take a deeper look at WP29 CSMS. So basically, CSMS is built out of two parts. The first one is the general CSMS, which is a requirement for the management system. And the second is the vehicle type approval requirement, which are requirements per vehicle type. And the way it works is that you need to first obtain your organization management certification, and then you need to obtain your vehicle type requirement. Additionally, the regulation has a part called Annex 5, and Annex 5 lists specific attacks and attack families that must be addressed as part of the threat modeling, the TARA process, and actually the OEM needs to protect the vehicles and the road users against these attack families. Let's take a more specific look at the CSMS requirement. So the CSMS requirement apply, first of all, to development, production, and post-production. So they cover the entire vehicle lifecycle. Secondly, it's mandated that all risks in Annex 5 will be addressed. Okay, that's a minimum bar. Okay, it's not a maximum bar, but it's a minimum bar. Then you need to have a process to identify risk, assess and treat risk, and assure your risk assessment is current. So this relates to the process and methodology of handling risk, and you need to have such a methodology that is tested and works and defined. Next two are actually quite centric. So first one is that you need to have a process to monitor, detect, and respond to cyber attacks, cyber threats, and vulnerabilities. So this is basically your way to detect threats and attacks that might threaten your vehicles, either in the present or in the future. And the next one is detecting cyber attacks from vehicle logs and data. So here it's required that you will collect logs from the vehicle, analyze these logs, and detect cyber attacks based on these logs. And further, you need to mitigate the threats and attacks within a reasonable time frame. Okay, so not only you need to detect, but you also need to respond in order to mitigate the risk and protect the road users. Next is securing the supply chain. So you need to have a methodology to secure the supply chain. And these are the main parts of the CSMS. I'm not talking today about the vehicle type requirements, but basically the vehicle type requirements say that per each vehicle type, you need to implement all of these processes and methodologies in order to make sure that the specific vehicle type is protected. For example, you need to do a thorough TARA per each vehicle type, threat modeling, you need to extract information, etc. So this is just a small excerpt from the WP29 CSMS. What we show here is these two centric requirements for detecting cyber threats, attacks, and analyzing vehicle logs in order to detect attacks and mitigate them. Another point that we can learn here is that WP29 doesn't go into much details on how this stuff should be done. It focuses mainly on what needs to be done. Okay, and that's I think the reason is just because it's a regulation and it needs to be very clear and concise. But you know, when OEMs want a clear methodology on how this should be done, which actually can be quite complex and a challenging task, then the reference is in the ISO SAE 21434 standard, which is actually very detailed and goes very deep into the methodologies and processes that need to be done throughout the vehicle lifecycle in order to make sure that all of these detection, threat detection, risk analysis, project management, organization management, all of this stuff, how it should be done, that's in the ISO SAE standard. Now let's take a look at the threats in Annex 5. So what you see here on the top are actually the threat families from Annex 5. So you see backend servers, update procedures, unintended human actions, external connectivity, vehicle communication channels, threat to vehicle data and code, and additional vulnerabilities. And what you see in the bottom is our own kind of generalized diagram that shows a typical connected vehicle service. So what you can see is on the left, you can see the actual cars. You can see the communication channels. You can see the backend services in the automotive cloud. So you can see the telematic server, the OTA server, and the application servers. And on the right, you can see the mobile applications. Okay, so this kind of is your typical connectivity service. And what you can see that any point in this connectivity service can be a base of an attack to the vehicles. Okay, there are multiple attack vectors. And actually, this attack vectors is pretty much the realization of the attack families that you see on the top part. Okay, so basically, the conclusion here is that any part of the mobility service can be a basis of attack. And actually, one interesting point to add is that the further away the attack point is, the more vehicles can be affected. Okay, so for example, if you look at attacks from the backend, from the telematic server or OTA server or application service, these kinds of attacks can actually affect the entire fleet and therefore pose the most significant risk on the vehicles. So this is actually, again, another research, small research that we did. So what we did is that we took 92 attacks, actually recent attacks from 2020, and we kind of divided them into the threat families in WP29. And this exercise was targeted to show, how the actual attacks divide between the different threat families. So you can see here, as written in the right of the slide, the threat families of WP29. And you can see the division of the 92 attacks or cyber incidents to these threat families. And by the way, and this is actually quite interesting, a single attack use case can actually belong to multiple threat families. Think of complex attack chains, etc. So what you can see here is again the division to threat families, and you can see the top ones. You can see communication channel, vehicle data and code, vulnerabilities in the vehicle, external connectivity. These are kind of the big ones. You see less number of incidents on backend servers and update procedures, but again, the number here, 11%, although it's small compared to the other numbers, again, remember that each backend threat can actually affect the entire fleet. So considering that, the number of 11% and 9% are significant. So now let's look a little bit deeper into each of these threat families and try to understand it more and see actual real examples for these threat families. So the first one is backend server threats. And what you can see on the right is how these threats are built. So basically, backend server threats are attacks from the backend servers to the vehicles. And that can be done by hacking to the backend server through the internet. It can be done by an insider hacking to the server, the backend server. And it could be done by physical access to the server. Okay, in each of these cases, the attacker gains privilege or elevation of privilege on the backend server, and by doing that, he can control and attack the entire fleet. And remember that in the next couple of years, again, we're adding more and more services and more capabilities to the backend servers. So the actual weight of this attack is going to grow in the next couple of years. It's already very high risk today. So let's look at specific examples for these attacks. So we chose two examples from 2020, and with both of them, the actual attack vector was through the telematics channel. Okay, so in both of them, the attacker was able to gain privilege over the telematics server from the telematics channel. The first one is a pen test partner. They actually worked with a TCU, TSP, and what they did is that they took a connected vehicle, they extracted the SIM card, and they actually use the SIM card in order to connect to the private APN that was serving this TSP. And from there, they were able to gain access into the backend of that TSP. Now, the connection there was secure. It used TLS and other, private APN and other means, but that actually didn't help. And the reason is that, they actually had the SIM card in their hand by just having physical access to the vehicle or to the telematics device. And using that, they were able to do privilege elevation inside the target organization. The way it was done is that although that connection was secured using TLS and other means, there was no network policy on the content of the connection. So the connection was not limited only to the telematic server, and they were able to reach the domain server, and by doing some other stuff, they were able to gain domain admin access, which effectively compromises the backend. So this is the first example. The second example is with an OEM, and here, so this is actually a hacker, but he was a friendly hacker. And what he did is that he was able to compromise the OEM backend again through the telematics channel. When he compromised the OEM backend, he was able to obtain the list of actual VINs and identifying information of all the cars in the OEM connected fleet. And furthermore, he was able to authenticate as each of those VINs. And by doing that, he was actually able to get control over the entire fleet of the OEM connected cars. So again, these are different scenarios, but the common thing about them is elevation of privilege through the telematic channel, and from there controlling the OEM or the TSP backend. Now let's look at an additional attack family, which is the WP29 Annex 5 communication channels. So these are basically threats that are through the communication channels. It could be an external communication channel between the vehicle and the backend, but it can also be an internal communication channel in the vehicle. And actually, the threats here are pretty classic threats, spoofing, man in the middle, eavesdropping, by just being in the middle, doing information disclosure, denial of service, data manipulation. So these are basically classic threats that are common to other domains that are not automotive, but the implementation of the threats is on the communication channels, either to the vehicle or within the vehicle. Okay, so basically, this is anything that you can do by just being in the middle. And if we look at an example for this, so this is actually not, this is actually again a hack that was done, a friendly hack. This is actually was done as part of a Coma AI project. I think it was a hackathon. And what the hackers were able to do is they actually were in the communication channel of a FlexRay bus. So FlexRay is based on time division, and they were able to reverse engineer the FlexRay communications. And based on that, they were able to inject commands that enabled the control of the steering system of the OEM. So again, it's injection and on the communication channel inside the vehicle, and the result is the ability to control the vehicle steering system. The next one is update procedures. So update procedures is, again, super critical. We're seeing OEMs having more and more update procedures, software update, FOTAs, and more and more OEMs have it, but also the FOTA goes deeper and deeper into the vehicle. So this is a high risk and very sensitive process protecting it is very important. And the threats here are threats to both remote over-the-air photo updates, but also to local software updates. And the threat types are compromising the process or compromising the code, for example, by compromising the keys that are basis to the code, so compromising the update code or denying legitimate updates. Okay, so this is actually any threat to the software update process. And the example for that is, again, quite a recent example. So here, a Canadian company, was able to bypass an OEM software update to do a local update that controls the vehicle functionality. So the use case here is that the OEM offers a software update that actually adds a feature to the vehicle, so the user can buy kind of a performance pack that just increases the performance of the vehicle remotely, and this is done as a service. And what this company offered is a service to actually do this update on the vehicle as part of a broader update that increases the vehicle's performance, but basically circumvent the OEM process and do all of that locally. And this is yet another case of bypassing the OEM procedures, and this is for just improving the performance of the vehicle. The next use case or threat family is unintended human actions. And here it's basically when something unintended happens. It can be as a result of an operator in the OEM backend that is tricked into doing something that he shouldn't, or it could be a local vehicle owner or users that is tricked into doing an unintended action. Or another use case is just not following a security procedure. And the example for that is a use case. This is actually a leasing company issue. So here, a user actually leased a vehicle and used it for some time. And he returned it to the leasing company, who then passed the vehicle on. But the credential of the user who controlled the vehicle was not removed, so a security procedure was not followed. And as a result, that user could control the vehicle for years after he had returned it. The next threat family is external connectivity threats. And these threats are generally threats that come from the vehicle close proximity. Okay, so the example here are key fob attacks, which I'm going to talk about soon, which are, of course, very common and risky. These are attacks from the vehicle local interface, such as the OBD, an OBD device that is connected to the vehicle, or a USB device. And another, I think, super important use case here is an infotainment app that is installed locally on the vehicle and can become rogue. So the example that we chose here, again, there are like many examples for that, but you know, since key fob attacks are very common, so we chose a key fob attack. And the attack, again, like from 2020, so a hacker actually stole 8 vehicles from 6 different OEMs over a period of time until he was arrested. And I think the interesting thing here is that the equipment he used was purchased outside, so he didn't need to be an expert. He could just buy the equipment and start his work. Okay, so this again shows the you know, it's easy to do, the bar is low, and there is high motivation, which means that this is high risk. The next one is threats to the vehicle data and code. So this is basically threat to the data that is on the vehicle. There's lots of data on the vehicle. For example, there are contacts and call logs on the infotainment service, on the infotainment device. So this information can be stolen. These threats include manipulation of data on the vehicle, erasing data on the vehicle, installing malware on the vehicle, so which is the threat to the code. So this is this threat family. So here we have two examples. The first one is a fraud example where in Utah the odometer of thousands of vehicles was manipulated, and of course the target of this attack is to reduce the odometer and gain financial gain from fraud. So this is one example. The second example is with an OEM that has a functionality of dashcam content being recorded. So the content was being recorded, but it was not signed or protected with cryptographic measures. So it was actually possible to manipulate the content, and this is actually pretty significant because you think of this content as content that can be used for insurance claims, legal, and basically when someone can manipulate this content, he can actually do repudiation and basically claim that things happened that didn't happen and vice versa. And of course, this creates legal risks and fraud, etc. So this is actually pretty significant. And the last threat family is additional vulnerabilities, which generally deals with hardening of hardware components, software components, using correct, advanced, and updated cryptography. So it's basically hardening of components. And the use case that we chose here is actually a very interesting hack on an OEM infotainment system. So with this hack, the group, which is Keen Security, they were able to compromise the Bluetooth pairing process. By doing this compromise, they were able to take control over the Bluetooth and the infotainment system. And from there, from there, they were able to progress into the vehicle, and they were able to actually manipulate another part of the infotainment system which connects to the CAN bus, and from there they could actually send the CAN messages inside into the vehicle and manipulate the vehicle physically. So this is first a very interesting attack chain, but even more interestingly here, the pairing, the compromise of the pairing process was done in the unauthenticated stage, which means that it was enough to be close to the vehicle in order to reach the canvas. So, so this completes the review of the WP29 threat families and use case. And as we can see, and as we also, spoke in the beginning, there are many attack vectors, and all of them can be compromised, and all of them are being compromised. So we're seeing a problem that is actually pretty complex because it's multi-layered software, hardware, close proximity, remote proximity. So there are many dimensions to this problem, and it's actually a really tough problem. So what's the solution? So we don't think that there's a single solution to the problem, and we don't think it, and also, of course, the regulation and the standard, they also talk about taking multiple measures over time. And let's go over at least some of the measures that we think are centric. Okay, so the first one is improving security by design. Okay, so you need to build the vehicle secure when you build and design the vehicle, and this means that you need to do extensive Tara on the vehicle in multiple layers. You need to do it on a single component, on a subsystem, and on the vehicle in its entirety and the connection to the outside world, as well as doing Tara on the backend services and the communication channel. Okay, so this is the first thing. And as part of this process, it's also, we think, critically important to also be aware of the future stages. Okay, so if you remember the vehicle type requirement of WP29, this actually requires that the vehicle emits strong telemetry to the backend systems, and this telemetry will be used in order to detect cyber attacks and respond to these attacks. So if you do a good job when you build the vehicle, you're actually providing strong support to the next phases in the vehicle's lifecycle. So this is security by design. The second one is regulation and enforcement. So both the WP29 regulation and the ISO SAE standard actually provide a comprehensive approach that deals with multiple aspects of the problem. It deals both with building the vehicle, with manufacturing the vehicle, with its post-production, and also, you know, they did actually quite a comprehensive work looking at management processes, project management processes. So you know, it's a pretty comprehensive job, and by just doing a profound job in following the regulation and the standard, you're improving your security posture by a lot. So this is the second one. The third one is bug bounties. So we see more and more OEMs performing bug bounties and actually leveraging the power of the community to find bugs. And of course, this is very meaningful. Actually, part of the incidents that we saw today are a result of bug bounties. And of course, these are significant incidents. So this again shows the ability of the community to assist OEMs in maintaining their vehicles and services secure. The next one is multi-layered security. So this deals with the post-production and the requirement to detect attacks on the vehicles based on logs and the threat feed. So we think this is required in order to detect attacks, detect insider attacks, attacks from the backend services, attacks on the vehicles. And this is also required by the regulation. And I'm going to go a little bit in more detail to that in the next slide. And the last is the vehicle SOC, the VSOC. So the VSOC is the actual part of the organization that monitors the vehicle fleets, the vehicle, and monitors for new vulnerabilities, and actually deals with collecting the information and orchestrating the response, both in building playbooks and enabling automated, fast, and effective responses, both in doing root cause analysis and detecting more complex cases and orchestrating more advanced responses, and also in giving guidance in the process of adding more and more data sources to the detection mechanism and making sure that the detection mechanism is effective. So we see more and more OEMs building vehicle SOCs, and we think it's actually a critical body in order to enable the implementation of the regulation and orchestrate the response. So let's go in a little bit more detail into the monitoring and response process. So what we see here is our model for operational monitoring on the fleet. And we have two kinds of inputs into this model. The first one is a threat feed. The threat feed should cover the mobility services and be centric on the automotive space. And the second is telemetries, which are telemetries from the vehicles, the communication channels, and the mobility services. All of this information is actually processed by a detection pipeline, which is multi-layered and should cover all the threats and the threat families that we saw in WP29. It starts with in-vehicle security, which can be either an IDPS solution or centralized detection based on the vehicle logs or the integration between them. Then we look at telematics security, which is the security of the telematics channel. So like we saw in the attacks we talked about earlier, telematic security is critical because using the telematics channel, an attacker can gain control over the backend services and control the entire fleet. And this is why telematic security is so important. The next one is monitoring the mobility application, and the mobility application is both the application server itself, but also the entire service, which is comprised from the telematic server and the mobility application, which is used in order to provide the mobility services and the functionality to the users. The next level is fleet monitoring. So sometimes you see a phenomena on a single vehicle which looks not significant, but if it happens on multiple vehicles or a large part of the fleet, it might indicate a serious problem. And remember that fleets are centrally managed, both from infotainment apps, photo updates, telematics channels. So the fleet, it's important to look at the fleet as one thing and monitor the fleet behavior as a whole. So these four layers look at the connected vehicles. The last layer, which is IT security, looks at actually the back end of the organization. And this is your regular IT security. And the attack vector here is again hacking into the organization from some other entry point and reaching the IT to OT connection, and from there attacking the fleet, or of course the other direction. So, so these layers cover the entire landscape of the threats, and all of that should be orchestrated again by the vehicle SOC. Once a threat is detected, a mitigation is applied. So a mitigation can be either an immediate mitigation driven by a playbook, for example, blocking communication, notifying the driver, doing some more specific in-vehicle operations. But it could also be longer-term mitigation, such as a software update. This can be a result of vehicle logs, but also a result of threats that you see from your automotive threat feed. So what's next? We saw that, again, there are lots of threats and mitigating them is not simple. And let's talk a little bit about the tools that we in Upstream enable to start working on these threats. So we have a few tools. First is the WP29 threat mapping tool, which actually maps all the threats on the automotive in WP29. The second one is the WP29 gap analysis tool, which actually helps you by answering a few simple questions to know your posture versus the regulation. And the third one that we provide is a threat analysis for ISO SAE 21434. Again, the risk analysis in the standard is not simple, and we actually give quite an easy-to-use tool that can help you do this work, and it actually implements all the logic in ISO SAE 21434. Another actually interesting thing and important is that very soon, within the next few days, we're going to publish Upstream's Global Automotive Cybersecurity Report for 2021. So this is actually a comprehensive view of attacks related specifically to vehicles, automotive, and mobility applications. And we review everything that happened in 2020. In the report, we have a specific section on WP29 that provides threat analysis in relation to the regulation. And also we have a pretty cool dark web section, so and also lots of other stuff. So again, very interesting and recommended. So if you want to get this report, feel free to go to our website with the link that we're seeing here, and apply to get the report. This is kind of an early registration, which means that you'll get it immediately when it's published. And that's about it. So any questions, please go ahead.
Yonatan, thank you so much for this presentation. What I loved about what you presented here is you first covered the complexity of the challenge of securing the automotive ecosystem. It's not just the car, and sometimes people are focused on in-vehicle. It's the back-end systems, it's the supply chain. It's this kind of changing threat landscape. You don't know what tomorrow's vulnerabilities will look like. And then, you went into detail about how some of the attacks within the past couple of years would actually cause some kind of non-compliance with WP29 or a failure to meet one of the requirements in it. So I really enjoyed this presentation because it helps, I think, me and I'm sure the viewers as well pair some of the news and headlines that we've seen in the past to actually these things would have impacted us. These things would have maybe caused some much more chaos inside of our organizations. After 2022 when WP29 starts to go into effect. And so in the comments, there's a little bit of a discussion about, this kind of tension. Why now? Why is it that the auto industry is saying, okay, we'll implement security because of WP29, because of the release of these guidelines and standards for automotive security that have been coming out for the past 2 years. And I do want to be careful with that, of course, because I think a lot of people shame the automakers, but really they have taken some good steps toward implementing security individually, and now you kind of see the industry coalescing toward a standard approach, toward a common regulation. Yonatan, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, should the industry, I don't know, I guess I'm just curious. Is it the regulation that's driving the implementation of this, or is it the other side where, the regulation's there, but actually it's the necessity of more connected vehicles going online and organizations seeing the real risk of this, not just regulatory, but safety and moving forward on this?
So I think that's a very interesting question, and actually not a simple one to answer. We actually see a kind of a dialect between the regulators and what's going on in the market. We've seen the risk grow actually pretty steadily. We research this stuff, and we're seeing, both the attack number of attacks growing, the magnitude of attacks, and also I didn't mention it here, but we're seeing again, one of the things that we're kind of researching is the relation between black hat attacks and white hat attacks, and we're seeing not only the number of attacks growing, but also the relative part of the black hat attacks growing. So if you look at this picture, this trend over time, you're seeing that the market is kind of maturing from a market that is based on research and all of this super interesting but theoretical attacks to a kind of a mature market that has high risk attacks, which are real and black hat. And so you see the overall risk is rising. And another trend is that you have more and more connected cars. So joining the maturing of the attack vectors together with just the number of connected cars growing just increases the overall risk. And again, regulators see that, governments see that, and so the regulations are becoming more and more stronger and global. Okay, so I think this kind of creates a two-way connection. On the one hand, risk to regulators that are forming a stronger, clearer, and more global regulation. And from the other side, the regulators are saying to the market, hey, you must do that. Okay, it's not a question of if you want to do that, you have to do that. Okay, and this I think these two directions actually move the market forward, which is very positive.
I have to agree with you. And I've attended one of Upstream's past presentations at the Auto Isaac, and what I found really insightful, I think, coming out of one of these reports is that, it's really easy to claim the sky is falling in automotive security. That yeah, we should have implemented these a long time ago. We could borrow from the lessons of IT security that it's cheaper to implement security by design early on than fix those things later in the process. Um, on the other hand, the thing, we align as an industry around this one event that kind of woke everyone up, the GPAC in some ways. And since then, we're fortunate to have not seen a big harmful event that actually impacted safety in some way. We have seen an increase of incidents, and that's exactly what you're presenting here. I think you're right that we're on this, scale where the market's moving forward independent of regulations because we're starting to see a lot more activity in the space. And then on the other hand, regulators are starting to get worried because we're seeing more activity and it becomes a question of national security and citizen safety. And so obviously they're becoming more worried about it. It's hard. It's hard to maintain that balance. But yeah, thank you for addressing both sides of that.
Sure.
Okay, and all right, and so let's for a moment talk about backend security because I think that IT security, cloud security is something that is kind of well understood uh, across the security space. People have gotten good at protecting data. Also, people have been bad at it, data breaches, etc. How do you think OEMs and automakers and suppliers are doing in this regard? You gave a few examples of some breaches in this space, but largely, they have done a lot of work to keep their corporate network secure thus far. You're not seeing a whole bunch of data breaches by auto companies up until now, like you have in other kind of spaces of IT and healthcare and uh, credit card information, etc. How do you think automakers have done up until this far with backend security?
So I think OEMs today, first of all, from what we're seeing, OEMs are taking cybersecurity super seriously. They're well aware of the risks, both to the data and to the vehicle, and to that end, at least the OEMs, we view them as mature organizations. And but that's just an industry view. If you look at specifically at OEMs, so they're kind of dual creature. Okay, I don't know if it's the correct term, but they have a duality. On the one hand, you can see them as regular organization with a very advanced IT infrastructure, and that's actually quite similar to any organization. They need to follow NIST and secure their data and secure the entry points, etc. On the other hand, OEMs are special because they have millions of vehicles under their command. So So in that end, they need to be very specialized. Okay, they need to specialize on the risks. They need to specialize on their vehicles. And when I say specialize on the vehicles, it's it seems kind of obvious, but when I say specialize in the vehicles, I mean with related to cybersecurity risks, which is a little bit less obvious. Okay, so they need to do both of that. Both things. They need to both handle, if you want, the OT part and the vehicle part, and they need to handle the IT part, and they need to monitor very carefully the connection between IT and OT. And if you go back to the connection between IT and OT, it's not trivial. Okay, it's actually quite challenging. If you just look at what the regulation is saying. So the regulation is talking about hacking to the backend through the network, but also to physical access or insider access. And these are things that are very difficult to protect from. Even the telematics channel specifically, it's it's usually proprietary protocols, so it's quite challenging to protect these protocols. And of course, you have insiders, okay, insider threats. So this connection between IT and OT is a big challenge, and we know that OEMs are concerned with it. Okay, so bottom line, we think that IT is like other organizations, and OT is a specialty, and they need to specialize, and we know that they're working on it.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to put it. This IT OT convergence where IT security is pretty well practiced, pretty well done. Most of these OEMs have a security operations center. They have well practiced incident response uh, procedures, etc. Good defenses. By introducing the OT aspect, you're kind of opening a hole into your IT network, not just from a security standpoint, letting attacks in from the vehicle that you've demonstrated, but also you're increasing the opportunities, meaning attackers may see this as maybe a more appetizing target, the back end, because I think one of your points in the presentation is that, yeah, you attack the backend system and you have access to the entire fleet. And so maybe attackers will focus more on the backend systems than they have in the past. So yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. Now, some of the dialogue in the comments as well has been about this tension between what they're describing as legacy automakers and some of the new and upcoming ones. I mean, you can't even say that anymore. Tesla is really leading the way in a lot of things. They're innovating, they're releasing a product that their customers really love. On the other hand, they also make a lot of headlines in security as well, where maybe they move too quickly and some security protection was overlooked. How do you now? I think that what the comments are getting at is legacy OEMs are used to pinching pennies because they're so competitive that they've had to squeeze money out wherever they can. And then the flaw on the other side of these kind of new automakers is that they're moving really fast. Um, I guess, can you discuss that tension a little bit, the two different approaches, maybe what you think is effective about each one and what's not effective?
Sure. So I'm gonna make like a specific comment about Tesla, and then like talk generally about the market. So yeah, Tesla has lots of headlines, and it's kind of good material for us, to learn from, and that's all pretty cool. But I don't think they're more or less secured. I think they're just very exposed in a way, and raise lots of interest. And I don't think the amount of headline necessarily insinuates the level of security. And generally about the running fast. So running fast is inevitable. Okay, so we know, and OEMs know that OEMs that will not run fast, it's not good. They will be threatened, and we think that all OEMs are going to run fast. It might be in different dimensions, or different feature sets, etc. But all OEMs are going to run fast in the next couple of years. All OEMs are connecting cars. All OEMs are offering services. So that's kind of inevitable. And this is again a reason why the regulation is so important. And we're kind of moving from the standards and regulations we saw 5 years ago were more focused on ECUs. But of course, that's not enough. And nowadays, you need to have the regulation cover the entire connected vehicle arena and the mobility service, because that's the only way to secure the OEMs running fast forward. Running forward is like a business thing, okay? It won't be avoided. So, but again, I think if we comply to the regulation wisely and do a good job at it, this will actually enable running forward in a secure way.
Yeah, and I think that maybe that's the argument to be made, which is that I think a lot of companies right now are reckoning with this new market for us, where they're gonna have to run fast. Running fast is going to be the new way to compete in the marketplace.
Exactly.
Who can release features more quickly to keep their passengers more engaged and more interested in the product. And so, from a security standpoint, I think the argument to be made is that, well, since you're going to need to run fast, you really can't be pinching pennies when it comes to security, because that is going to be the thing that enables you to, or a security incident would really slow you down.
Absolutely, I
And
agree.
so, I want to talk about that for 1 second, and then we have a few more questions from the audience. It's that, you presented here in this presentation a few incidents that would have caused kind of, non-compliance to WP29, or caused some kind of reaction within the context of this regulation. And often, it's hard to quantify the effect of an automotive security incident. There's this kind of brand damage, maybe if it's serious and could, impact safety, passengers will be less likely to buy cars, or less likely to get in cars, or maybe it'll jeopardize the future of autonomous vehicles. But we have a regulation now. So can you help the audience understand what one of these incidents, maybe it's a minor incident, maybe it's a key fob attack, it's people stealing cars, yet it still causes non-compliance to WP29. Can you talk a little bit about what the financial impact that may have to an organization now that we have a regulation to point to?
Yeah, so the impact is it's actually I think a very interesting topic, and I'm going to the beginning of your question, and I think the interesting question is, what is the difference between the automotive market and like other markets? Because when someone hacks a server and does some ransomware on the data, that's also a very serious thing. What we see in the IT space. Okay, but still, automotive is special, and I think it's the fundamental reason is the role of and the meaning of the car in our lives. Because the car, first of all, it's our car. It has our stuff in it. When someone steals our car, it's financial, like very serious financial damage, and even emotional damage. And also, there's the thing of safety. Okay, so the thing is, when a vehicle is hacked, it's the minimum is financial or operational damage, but that's only the minimum. The maximum is physical damage. And the special thing about the automotive market is that it's physical damage that is actually, It's about us. Okay, it's about the consumers. And I think this combination is what makes it special. And the thing is that when someone hacks a vehicle or hacks even a backend server, it starts with like unlocking the car and stealing the car, but you don't know where it ends. And I think this is the fundamental thing. This is, I think, the big driver of the market. Okay, this is so this is about impact. The fact that the impact is not capped, I think that's a key point.
Yeah, and even if the actions on objectives of the attacker was simply to get credit card information because they could sell that and make money. A lot of times it's about making money. Most times, if not all times, it's about making money. That attackers will go where there's money to be made. Um, and so maybe they're not after impacting safety because that doesn't make them money. However, the result could have been impacted safety. And so, really, I hope that regulators are thinking along these lines where, sure, the attackers didn't do anything bad, but they could have. So in the case of these incidents, that maybe, I would hope that regulators are thinking along those lines that, an incident, looking at it the lens through not the impact that it had, but the impact that it could have had.
Absolutely.
So the next question from the audience is, um, I mean, it's a basic question. Do you think that automakers are underestimating the risks or overestimating them? I mean, where do you think it falls on the spectrum?
So I think there have been a shift in the last few years. It started, automakers were always aware of the risk. They're an expert in their systems, and they understand more than anyone their risk. Actually, I'm kind of remembering a very interesting paper that I read. I think it was a year ago or 2 years ago. It was a consumer report about the risk in connected vehicles, and this is I actually recommend reading it. It's a great research, and they're actually citing financial reports of OEMs that actually mention the risks related to connected cars very specifically to their shareholders. I learned a lot from that report, and so I think automakers are well aware of their risk, and there have been. Although, on the other hand, definitely the regulations we're seeing are definitely impacting the market. This is why we have these presentations and we talk about the regulations and we try to understand them better. So definitely, it's moving them, in order to uh, again, like in order to do security. I actually spoke about it in the presentation. It needs to be very deep into the organization. Okay, it's not like a one stage. Just because of the complexity of this market, and just because it's very complex to build a car, it needs to be very deeply embedded into the organization, from the design through the production to post production. And this is actually a big shift. So it's not easy for an OEM to do this shift. And I think the way the regulation is moving the needle is that it causes, I would say, a multi-layer change in it's just very deep, the change. And this is, I think, the effect of the regulation.
Yeah, I remember hearing once before the GPAC a saying that was, woe to the company that the automotive company that gets hacked first, because they'll be the poster child of it. And
Yeah.
that's kind of how it went, where it was this kind of waking up and reckoning, and now it's woe to the second company that really gets hacked in a meaningful and very big way. Um, So, it's interesting to kind of look at how the market forces have driven this industry, but yeah, I think that the automakers are taking the risks seriously. That's how I've been viewing this.
Absolutely.
And the last question here is, all right, so this WP29 regulation, you, you had showed a slide about all these different standards and best practices and frameworks and one regulation, which is WP29. For us, it's kind of easy to see through the fog well, when you spend a lot of time with it, you see what's driving the market. And really it's the financial impact of an automaker that wants to sell cars in the group of countries that participates with this UNECE WP29. Um, can you just talk a little bit about that at the global landscape? So, a US automaker, do they need to, I mean, they only need to comply with the regulation if they want to sell cars in Europe. What about Asia and other parts of the world? How is the globe thinking about automotive security? Is it all around WP29? Are they working on their own? What's that look like to you?
So that's again like a very good question. I think we can look at it in two ways. One is the more technical perspective of who is legally affected by the regulation, and we can count the countries. It's 54 countries, and we can multiply it by the market size, etc. But at least from what we're seeing, this is not the correct way to think of it, because it's just not the reality. The reality is that there are many regulations, but it's a little bit like a critical mass thing. Okay, so you can do regulation, and if it's in the, I would say, national level, it's very hard for a national regulation to affect the automotive market because the automotive market is global. But when you look at an international regulation, it affects in the global market, which affects the OEM. But specifically, the WP29, because it has all of these strong markets, it kind of, at least from what we're seeing, it's creating the critical mass. Okay, so what we're seeing is that OEMs, even ones that are not directly impacted by the regulation, still use it because they know that it's coming, okay? And they know that they're selling in these countries. So an OEM thinks globally, okay? So if an OEM sees that the regulation is affecting, enough critical mass of the globe, then it will take, it will just implement the regulation. So this is what we're seeing. We're seeing that OEMs, both the ones who are directly and legally impacted, but also ones that are indirectly impacted, are all moving forward with the regulation. This is at least our view.
Mm. And to bring it kind of full circle back to where we started, which is that uh, the automotive industry is notorious for pinching. And that's, not a bad thing. Competition brings down prices. It, ultimately, hopefully, saves money for the end consumer. Being fiscally responsible is important, and making sure that you're not over allocating and securing. I think there's an analogy. You don't set up a whole bunch of security for a light bulb if the risk is, that an attacker can do very little to the light bulb. Um, so, you invest up to the amount of money that could be lost. You don't invest more than that money. Safety obviously complicates that. But I guess how do you think this penny pinching mentality will impact this global adherence to regulations? For example, will a North American automaker consider getting type approval for vehicles on participating country roads, but not other countries that aren't participating? Is it going to become this complex web, or do you think that the secure cars will permeate globally? If they can save a few dollars by not doing it because there is no regulation, say in the US, to do that.
So I think obviously OEMs need to manage their costs, and this makes sense. On the other hand, I think this is the power of the regulation. When a regulator comes and tells an OEM you must do it, it kind of eliminates the OEM's possible thought of maybe I'll postpone it, or maybe I'll do it later, or maybe I'll do it sometime. And I think and also keep in mind that a lot of the cost is more of an infrastructure cost. Okay, you need to set up processes, you need to set up systems, you need to build skills, and all of this work is more of a global expense. And actually the regulation is built this way, right? It says that you need to build a management system and then approve vehicles by type. And I think a large part of the expense will be more on the global system. Hiring the people, setting up the processes, setting up the technologies, building the VSOC, and once this is done, the marginal expense per vehicle type will be it will be less of a problem, I think. And yes, OEMs will probably manage it according to the priority of the regulation, but ultimately, the regulation itself is enlarging its scope to more and more types of vehicles, and that's specifically true for WP29. And also, again, from the OEM perspective, once the management system is set up, so I'm sure OEMs will, they do want to secure the vehicles, so I'm sure they will want to apply the processes for their entire offering. This is my view.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it would cost, with the mentality of these large corporations planning 5 to 10 years from now, it would cost more to design security out. So I tend to agree that I think that the investment is upfront, and then, it's kind of this continuous investment, but not so big to just permeate that through future vehicle programs.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so that was the final question, Yonatan. Is there anything else you want to leave our current audience and our future viewers with before we close out here?
So no, I think we had excellent questions, and thanks for everyone's time. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Okay, well, so then those of you listening, thank you for tuning in. I hope you tune in to the future presentations. There are some really exciting speakers and topics. Stay tuned. There's a lot going on with the ASRG. We're looking to build this global community, bring value to our members. I know that's top of priority for all us that are helping work and lead the ASRG. So again, thanks for tuning in. I look forward to hearing the next presentation. Yonatan, you're always welcome back, you and your team. And yeah, with that, we'll close out. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye bye.